And change is a topic that I grapple with very often. We're in the middle of this massive change, as you all are experiencing, and people are feeling and experiencing a lot of emotions. So to get it started, we have a chat on the YouTube live stream. Would you please type what's one change that you've been grappling with right now, so we can start seeing your thoughts coming through. And I would like to ask the same questions to our panelists, and so please first introduce yourself and then share your answer with us. What's one change you're grappling with right now?
All right, I'll have a go. So some weeks ago, it seemed like what we're experiencing was happening very far away, and then it kind of got closer into Australia. And then this week, it actually hit my home. My husband is a dental specialist, and he had to close his practice yesterday indefinitely. So all his clinical staff and everyone have stopped work, and we don't know when they're going back. It's the first time in his life he hasn't got a job to go to. So it's in my home now. So I guess it's just been coming in waves.
Thank you, Alison.
I think for me, we've already done a lot of work over the years virtually. This is Josh Freedman. I'm the CEO of 6 Seconds. And our, we've been a virtual organization in the last 15 years. We've never had our whole staff in one room at a time. So that part's not really new. And, teaching online is not really new. But I think for me, what I'm grappling with is the unknown part of this and the amount of just kind of profound uncertainty that's all over the world. And so it's the breadth of this change and the depth of this change that feels hard to me.
How about you, Eric?
I think probably the word that comes to mind would be constrainment. I'm being limited in the way that I do what I do, whether it be in professional or personal. And then recognizing and working on how do I have the best me show up despite circumstances that are not, I guess if I could say, normal. And as challenging as that is, it's really, really important. So that's the big one for me.
Thank you. We also have Maria Jackson on the panel today. I'd like to hear what Maria has to say.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. So I'm Maria Jackson. I work for the Global Office of 6 Seconds, and I'm also the author of the Illuminate series. I think the biggest change for me right now has been not seeing people. I can feel my brain just slowly going crazy, not having the social interaction that I'm used to. I just moved to a new city to be close to family, and it kind of feels like a tease that now I can't see them. So I'm definitely missing that and feeling that very deeply, that change.
Thank you. And I'm reading some comments from the chat as well. And there are all kinds of different situations around the world, and for many of us, might be looking more similar to the usual times. But for some people, things are, as Alison was mentioning, could be a lot more of a bigger impact. Some people were saying that they've been laid off, some losing business, and less physical movement. So I would like to kind of move to another question that is tangentially related to this one. So we all have experiencing a lot of different changes in our lives. Why do we have so many complex and difficult feelings when we face big changes such as this one from the pandemic?
Well, maybe I'll start and say, I think that a lot of people probably like change and enjoy change, and when they're in the driver's seat of it, or at least feel some amount of control. And if you think about even something like, okay, I'm gonna change my diet, I'm gonna exercise more, I'm gonna start doing yoga. We say, okay, that's a choice I'm making. And even that for a lot of us is something hard to do, and brings up a lot of challenges around self-compassion and self-judgment, and a sense of like, can I do it? And the difficulty of trying something new. And, that stepping into the unknown, and our brains actually really resist the unknown. And then we have something like this moment where our sense of powerlessness and vulnerability is so much deeper. I know some people are typing in the chat that they're losing their jobs, and that they don't know where another one is. And, we have family members who are getting sick, and we have, I don't think, unless you happen to be like a biomolecular engineer who like can invent a cure, most of us have a deep level of powerlessness right now.
I would echo kind of what you said there, Josh, and also add to it that, rapid change when you're in the driver's seat, you kind of feel pretty good about it. And this one, and seeing the reactions and what's driving people and what decisions they're making, sometimes for the good, certainly some inspiring things, and then sometimes the not so good. I see toilet paper running across my brain at the moment. But I really firmly believe we were made to be able to thrive in the midst of all of this. And that may be overly optimistic, but I really do believe that. And some of us maybe have been working on it in the times when things were, going pretty well. Maybe some were not, but I think there's an opportunity to rise to the occasion.
Thanks, Derek. And I wholeheartedly agree with all of those things. And I think for many people I'm speaking to, it was the suddenness of it, the unexpectedness, and the depth and complexity. We often have a lead up time to prepare for something. And I'm experiencing that some people who had done the work, have high emotional intelligence, were change ready, have sort of, no matter how serious the situation is, have had some skills to ride this wave. But even for them, it's been so deep, so unexpected, so massive, so global. Nobody's untouched. And so it's almost how are our brains designed to even cope with a point in time like this? And yet I see a big change this week from last week, and maybe we'll talk about that a bit later. But it seems to me such a rapidly evolving thing, even in our emotional response to it.
Yeah, so I'm seeing, especially when we talk about this kind of change that we're not choosing, a lot of fear. And I actually took a moment before this call to look on the Emotoscope feeling chart, which is a great resource that gives us the messages of feelings. And fear means something I care about is at risk. And I would think that anxiety is this feeling that something's at risk happening over and over and over again, and having a real impact on our nervous system and on our society. So then the question there would be from fear, from this Emotoscope feeling chart, is the point is to focus attention on potential problems. And I think also to have us focus on what's important. So how can we focus on what's important in this time of instability?
Thank you, Maria. And another question on this is, what's the value of such emotions as anxiety and fear that keep coming up in this specific crisis, but in a lot of change processes? Do you think they motivate change, or do you think they block change?
Well, I have, been saying for years, there's no such thing as negative feelings, and all feelings have value. And yet, over the last couple of weeks, having these times where I feel like these feelings are crashing on me and it's hard to breathe. And it's intensely painful to be deeply in that sense of helplessness and sense of failure. And just like kind of, I literally felt it as like this weight in my chest where it was hard to breathe. And yet my experience is that when we don't hide from feelings, and personally, I'm not somebody who started out learning about emotions. It was sort of stumbled into this, and I was really afraid of emotions. And so I didn't, I didn't know how to deal with this. And I feel really lucky that I've had some time in the last 20 years to start learning. But for me now, what's happened in the last couple of weeks is, as I've let myself feel some of those feelings, I've gotten a much deeper clarity on my role and responsibility as a leader, on what's important to me, and where I do have power. I'm not powerless. And that has turned into a huge amount of energy for me. And I've worked harder in the last 2 weeks than I have at any time I can remember. And I'm just feel full of energy. Today, I'm kind of coming to the end of that wave is kind of crashing down, and need to tap back in.
Thanks, Josh. And I just would like to actually acknowledge you now, because the wave of energy you're finding at this point is just creating such awesome content and opportunities for all of us as we connect from the opposite ends of the globe, and we're all deeply appreciative of that energy. I also went back to the chart, Maria, and had a look. Fear is what's at risk, and to me that crystallized that in these moments, if we the messages from fear and anxiety really are that if we honor those feelings and can move through those feelings in a sense of not diminishing them at all, because the rawness of what we're all feeling right now needs to be acknowledged and held closely. But by the same token, it's that call to action, that how do we find calm? The antidote to anxiety is calm. And it's like, okay, there's a lot at risk, but if I don't stay calm, I might make some awful decisions at the moment. And I might choose to do things that have long-term ramifications. So not only can it energize us in the short term, but bringing the calm can help us keep our prefrontal cortex open for some good thinking and creativity to find new ways of doing things right now. And I'm excited to see all around me, people are just starting to do that. It seems like they're holding on to these, acknowledging fear and anxiety, but they're moving through to find some new ways. And it's kind of exciting to see that happen.
I think there's a risk of people trying to go too fast out of the struggle and sort of like, okay, I'm done being anxious, let's move on.
Right, you can accept the change and get it for granted, or you can retire and let the fear guide you. What do you think? Eric?
I think that our emotions, besides the fact that they're communicators in the moment, I think they also give us clues from our past that may be trying to tell us something about, quite frankly, why we may be the people, wherever we may be, for this time. Because I know if I let my emotions continue to communicate just in this moment, it can be overwhelming, because they can come at you like tracer bullets, right? Where they're just going everywhere at once. But when I slow it down and kind of start looking back and looking for those clues that they may be trying to tell me, I remember hearing Josh, you saying earlier about, I'm not powerless. There is power here, but it's that process for me.
Maria?
Yeah, I think there's such power in just observing the emotion. We have this framework for looking at emotions that's validate, explore, transform. And when we're thinking about emotions like fear and anxiety that aren't very comfortable to sit in, it's very tempting to jump to the explore and the transform before we really sit in the validate. So I've been practicing personally. I mean, this morning I was sitting on my deck and just breathing into the emotions that I was feeling. And I did the classic Josh question of asking myself how I was feeling. And the first one's like, irritated and scared and anxious. And then I asked what else? And there was grief. And then I just sat with that grief and I just breathed into it and I felt it in my body and validated it and witnessed it.
A new question would be, what can we learn through this time, through this crisis, that can help us for future changes, as small as they might be, but for future waves of change in our personal life or in our work?
Well, I just want to add to something Maria just said about grief, which is I do find myself grieving. Like 2020 was off to an amazing start, and like I loved what we had planned and the direction we were going and what was happening with my family and with my work and with my colleagues. And we're about to launch this awesome project with UNICEF, and that's all either on hold or not happening as I planned it. And I think that gives me some clue, is in what you said, Tom, about thinking about the future and other changes. Because I tend to be very optimistic and tend to focus on opportunities, I think sometimes I forget that when we change, there is something we're ending and something we're letting go of. And so I think that's useful for me to remember that there is, every change ends something, and that ending actually creates an opportunity to start something.
Thank you, Josh. Alison, would you like to?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yesterday I was speaking to actually a coach who consults with our network who lives in New Zealand, and he lived through the Christchurch earthquakes with his family of 4 children. And he was just saying, it took about 10 years for them as a family to work through the emotion of that time. And what's happening to all of us now, he describes as he's having similar response now to what they experienced in that earthquake. And I think for me, I feel like there's something in the whole of this experience that it's going to take time and acceptance and trying to find new energy for new ways through that process. And yeah, it's not something we can hurry through. Maria, I love what you said, just sitting with the grief, the feeling. And my daughter in London was telling me yesterday, she just actually started to cry, and just her boyfriend had to hold her for several hours. She can't get home at the moment. And so, the loss, the letting go of projects, the letting go of being together as family, there's letting go happening at every level at the moment. And just finding ways that, as we do as EQ practitioners, to try and sit with those feelings. Yeah. And Eric, I totally connect with your feeling of, perhaps we're here at this point in history and this point in time for a reason. There's something about this whole experience that's kind of way beyond me in understanding, but there's got to be purpose to it.
I wanted to actually ask Eric a question about that, if I can, Tom.
Please.
One of the things that I know that you focus on in your work in spiritual emotional intelligence is the idea of connectedness. And I don't think there's ever been a time in my life when so many people in the world were facing the same thing and thinking about the same thing. And I'm wondering, kind of in this sense of like this sense of big connectedness to what's bigger than us, what you're seeing as the kind of opportunity in this for us to recognize our shared humanity.
Yeah, I really think, Josh, from my perspective, it's this idea about balance and alignment to gain that sort of connectedness, and where we're at with ourselves. Obviously, we've been talking a lot here. Certainly, Maria, I'm thinking of the things you were saying. It's getting in touch with ourselves individually, and then evaluating, and that idea around how we're doing that with the people we love the most. And I'm one of those that if I'm not careful, I'll blow right past my family because I'm on a mission. And this has slowed me down because I can't be that, literally. So focusing in on them, and then kind of that idea about, well, where's my place in the world? I mean, this is a worldwide thing, it's one thing when it's regional or, that kind of approach, but it's kind of, I kind of looking at how do I fit into that? And once we do the kind of things that move us toward balance and alignment, it helps us. It kind of comes back to that idea of preparedness. And when I said earlier about, those clues, those things that maybe our emotions are whispering to us to say, this has something to do with that person you met 10 years ago and that conversation over coffee. It wasn't insignificant. It's put you and prepared you for what you have now. And I want to see more people getting that balance and alignment with those spheres. And that truly is the spiritual piece in its core. It really is.
I love what you said, Eric, about in a way, this crisis, this big change makes us feel more united. There is more of the sense of oneness. And as Ali was saying, another thing that these changes sparked is creativity to look at things in a different way. And Josh was saying energy to do more work that he's ever done in his life. And so I saw a comment on the chat about what is the flip side of this feeling of fear? What is the psychological opposite of that? Maria, what do you think?
Well, the way I read it was the physiological. So not just the what's up here, but in the body, right. What's happening. And thank you for that question. So I actually would turn it the other way first. So what are the physiological signals of when you're feeling afraid and when you're feeling scared, overwhelmed, stressed? And, if we were in a Zoom room together, I'd be asking participants, how do you know in your body that you are feeling these kinds of feelings? And I guess I'd just ask the panelists that. What are some of the physiological symptoms of fear? I'll start with the heart rate speeding up.
Breathing more shallowly.
Oddly enough, for me, it's the almost a sense of tiredness. I can't put it, maybe I want to say resignation, but just a reality setting in, descending on you.
I think for me, it's like a tightness in my throat. Hurts to swallow then.
This sense of stillness for me as well.
Yeah, slowing down, like really tuning in to things in a different way.
Literally, the eyes dilate because we want to take in more light to see what the potential threat could be. What's the tiger over there? Let's get a good look at it. So these are all common physiological symptoms of stress, of fear. Many of these we can't control. I don't know about you, but I can't control how much my eyes dilate. But there are a few that we can. So, Ali and Josh, you were saying, about the tightness in the chest or the shallow breathing. So I would say one of the physiological opposites of fear is breathing deeply. And that's something every single one of us can control. Every single one of us can do right now. We can take a deep inhale in and a full exhale out. And we can communicate with our bodies that things are okay.
Thank you, Maria. And I think that's especially important right now because people are slowly realizing that this might not be a quick thing. It might be more of a marathon kind of thing. And so with this level of intensity of emotions that we're all experiencing, how can we navigate this time and this whole crisis without experiencing burnout?
You know what, Tom, that's a great question. And I think it's the idea of using self-empathy a bit, because this is incredibly complex and confusing. Sort of my prayer is that people would just cut themselves some slack, be okay with, I tried it 3 times and I stumbled 3 times. I tried it again and it didn't go like I wanted. I want them to keep going, but I also want them to realize it's okay. I mean, we're all falling. We all are.
I'm certainly noticing my level of resilience, and maybe a small thing, a thing that's really this big is seeming this big right now, or this big right now. And so I think that kind of giving yourself a break piece of it. For me, what's been most powerful has been, and this is what I was saying about, what I'm learning about leadership, really getting more clarity about what is my responsibility and what isn't. And where, I think a lot of times in one of my patterns is that when I see a problem, I want to fix it. I want to jump in there. I want to take action. I want to do. And I know as a CEO, that's not a great pattern. And I've known that for a long time, that really my job as a CEO is about setting context and helping make space for other people to do the work, not so much doing the work myself. But it's comfortable to jump in there and take action. And so this experience where I can't solve it, and I can't do what I want to do, has really pushed me to think about, where is my sphere of responsibility? Where is my ownership in this? And to let other people have ownership of their part and not try to take control. And I think that kind of stepping back from over asserting or thinking my power is bigger than it is. And, I guess confronting the reality that a lot of what I thought was under my control was just an illusion anyway.
Thank you, Josh. I love what you said about some small things could seem really big, and my mind went straight to the opposite of what you were saying. In a way, a small nice gesture or a small detail in our now lives at home, a nice meal, the sun perching out of the window, it could be really big, makes a huge difference. That self-care that Eric also was talking about, that self-empathy. I would love to hear from Maria and Alison about this.
Well, what you just said kind of made me laugh, because I, just moved to a new place, and so I'm living in a very city environment, so I can see my neighbors in the yard next door from my porch, And I tell you what, having a 20-minute conversation with my neighbor from across the fence has never felt so exhilarating. So yes, even those little things, the good little things, also feel big.
Alison?
I'm thinking of so many things here, Tom. I'm thinking of this, some of the stories. To me, it's a time for self-care. And we all know self-care is important, but now we actually have time and space, and we're many people at home. And for those who have families, they're with their families at home. I feel really for people now who are living alone in this time. But that self-care can take so many forms now, whether it's, getting some yoga streamed and doing some yoga, or finding ways to connect differently. I was introduced to an app about 2 weeks ago, and my family are addicted to it now, and we're connecting with our family all over the world. It's called House Party. I don't know if you've heard of it. And it's free and it's super fun. You can play games with each other, and we're actually just trying to find some space for connectedness and humor there's no weekend anymore. We can just do this any time of the day. And so we're just trying to stop the burnout by finding the small moments of joy where we can connect virtually in different ways than we'd ever imagined. I had my husband on a Zoom call yesterday for the first time of his life, and he was super excited. He was jumping up and down. And he said, so this is where you've been for the last 4 years, in this place? And I went, yeah. He went, oh, this is awesome. So we had a moment of joy there. So yeah, I guess to try and prevent burnout, it's like
one of my children said recently, oh, so it only took a global pandemic to get the whole family on a Zoom together.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on something Robin Eva typed in the chat about purpose. And one of the things that I think is really confusing to a lot of people, and definitely to me, about purpose is about being and doing. And I think sometimes we connect leadership with doing, and we think, okay, my purpose is about doing this. But at 6 Seconds, we talk about pursuing noble goals. And I know all of us are really committed to the idea that it's not just about what you do, but who are you being in whatever you're doing. And so if we can kind of step back from this idea of purpose is connected with doing, and we say, why would I do that? Like if I could do whatever I wanted, I'd do X. Why? And for me, what's happened in this, in the depth of my moments of despair in the last few weeks, I've really grappled with why I care so much about the work that we're doing, and thought a lot about, okay, I can't do it in that way, but can I do it in the way that I'm being? I care about this work in part because it gives people a sense of freedom, of stepping out of the constraints of the way they saw themselves in the world. And I can't do that in the same way that I've been doing it. So can I just have that as something that I'm holding in the way that I see people, even in this weird, sort of distant little boxes? And, seeing that in them, and it doesn't matter if I say it or not, I think people are feeling it in their interactions with me.
I think one of the really wonderful ways of being instead of doing is that it makes us do this. So
damn it.
I'd much rather just focus on reflection. But really, I mean, so you brought up a noble goal. So my noble goal is to nurture inner illumination. And, I love talking with people and helping them pull out their own light and their self-compassion and self-empathy, as Eric was saying. And I think what this sort of scenario has made me do is do this. So I also can be taking this time to nurture my own inner illumination. So that might be another sort of flavor of a way to look at what to do with this time if your purpose is typically married to serving others. How can you turn it on yourself?
Eric, what do you think with using the lens of the spiritual intelligence? How does that connect?
Well, I was going down that path and Josh, doing that little bit of a pivot was great. And I think that came from the chat. I heard a wise person say once that your purpose is oftentimes found inside of the thing that breaks your heart. And your heart is the core to your spiritual. And I think about my own experience. I know some people thought I was crazy 15 years ago when I would tell them, I can't stand seeing people stuck. And it really burdened me. And that was a clue into what is happening now. And I think once we kind of discover that a bit, and it's not something that forms overnight, obviously, I think it's another part of that preparation for how we live going forward. And it just kind of unfolds that story a bit more. But certainly at the core of the spiritual is that what is it? What's the event? What's the person? What's the thing that broke your heart? That's what I found it to be.
I was just thinking about this comment that David, I don't know how to pronounce the name, sorry, David, Wunsch brought up earlier about being dropped into this new landscape, and kind of there's so much that's new. And I know, Ali, you do a lot of work on the idea of agility and how do we kind of be able to move more quickly through change. And I'm wondering, in this sense of like, there's so much that's new and unknown and uncertain, we're on this alien, we're like in this alien landscape. Like, how do we become more adaptive?
Wow, Josh, that's a big question. So I'm thinking of, I have been coaching a lot this last week or two. I actually, as part of my service, reached out to some of our very senior leaders in many of the clients we work with and said, I'd like to offer you a couple of pro bono sessions. And it's been a really deep insight into levels of leadership, particularly. I know we're all leaders of ourselves. We don't have to have people we're leading. What is it that we need in these moments? How do we shift? How do we bring ourselves to calm so we can think clearly? And for all of them, you know, Josh, for many of them, it's been name it to tame it, have someone to talk to, talk it out, talk it through, find the trusted people in your life, the advisors. We don't need to bottle and brew this stuff. It's what's very different about this experience is that we are all in it, and we were never meant to do this alone. And for me, the agility comes from awareness. And I love, Maria, yep. There's never been a greater time to turn the light back on our own illumination and to actually recognize, you know, what are some of our patterns, particularly what's causing us to be stuck, what's getting in the way. It's a time to serve. It's a time where we, you know, high functioning people, when we're high functioning anxiety people, we might want to take control. If we're low functioning anxiety people, we might want to just shut down and run away and hide under a dune and hope the world disappears. But there's a sacred middle ground where we have to breathe through it and find a new way. And how can we serve through this time? And the connection to noble goal or purpose has been profoundly important for many people at this time, and thinking in 10 years' time, what part of this will be important? What, as a leader, do I want to take away from this experience and say, you know, we did good. It was the toughest of times, but we've come out stronger. We've come out with more awareness. We can shift more quickly when we need to. We learned a whole bunch of new skills. So for me, I think about agile as awareness, generosity, insight, love of learning. I don't think I've ever known so much free resourcing at the moment as there is. And so everyone's learning. Even I signed up for a new online course. I thought, I don't know when I'm going to do this, but I just want to learn something at the moment, which is part of probably anxiety playing out. It's a way of filling a space probably, but I'm loving the learning and the opportunity. So yeah, it's all the things we always know, but in the busyness of doing and getting into offices and getting stuck in traffic and all the rest that goes on in the life of living and working, we forget all this stuff. And what I'd love to see out of this is that people practice this now daily and don't lose the essence of what we're having to reach into now to survive and eventually start to thrive through these times, but that this becomes our way, our new way, which we've sort of been talking about for some time in Leading Through Change, but now it's very real. And interestingly, I am writing an online program around change. I've gone back in and I'm rewriting modules because I'm learning so much every day. In the depth of this, I think the change we normally talk about, innovation, you know, AI, everything like this is brought a whole new lens to what people really do go through. And
right.
So,
we used to think we were in volatile and uncertain times.
Yes.
Back in the old days, 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks, exactly, Josh. 2 weeks ago, it feels different now. But I think we've got gems, and the essence of what we're going through, there's learnings for all of us that we can take forward, because we're going to have another one of these sometime down the track. If it's not a virus, it'll be something. And we're here to navigate through this as best we can and learn.
So there was something Eric said a few minutes ago that really touched me, and I've been trying to think about why. And Eric, you made a comment about, you know, you met somebody and that you had that conversation, and that's part of what's prepared you for now. And in our coaching programs, Marilyn Jorgensen, who leads our coach training, talks about, you know, when we think about our presence as a coach, that's supported by this long history behind us. That sense that like in these times of really big feelings and a lot of struggle, there's, I guess, maybe in part because of all of the emotion, there's something that becomes, it's hard, but some things become really clear. And I think like all of those things, all of that learning, all of those connections that are kind of supporting me now, all of these conversations that I've gotten the privilege of being part of, I feel like that's all brought me to this moment to be able to say, I can serve people here and now, and not in the same way that I thought I was going to, but anyway, thank you for that, Eric.
Thank you,
Yeah,
John.
absolutely.
Wow, this is a very deep topic we could talk about for forever. In fact, we have 10 questions on the line that we were not going to be able to look at.
Sorry.
No, it's fascinating. I wish we could go on for more than an hour. I would love to ask you a closing question. We are now experiencing this huge pervasive change, but we will be experiencing a very similar intense change in a few months when we're going to go back to normal, or to the new normal, as a lot of people are being referring to. And so my question is, how will we handle that change? What will we bring with us that we have learned now to become part of the new normal?
You know what I think, Tom, is that I have this vision in my head of that tree that has been beside a river, and it's always thriving. Good season, bad season, wet weather, you know, whatever it may be. And every time you pass it, you see it and it's there. I think that's a great opportunity that we all have in the areas where we've been given responsibility and influence, to be that constant, you know, because I used to angst a bit about, well, are people going to just go back to doing, you know, the same stuff they did before, complacency, blah, blah, blah. And I think one of the ways that we help that not to happen is to be that vibrant, healthy tree that's good in season and good and bad.
Thank you, Eric. Alison, what would you like to say on this?
Oh, I love that image. I've sort of got that image in my mind now. I think things will be different, and I'm really curious as to what it's going to look and feel like. Someone said to me yesterday, they have big commercial office spaces, pay a lot of rental. They've realized now the benefits of working virtually. They've had a staff of 13,000 people. They did a lot of planning in the first week, and they flicked to an entirely virtual model where no one went to work the next day. They're a global organization, and they flew through that next day. It was a Tuesday. He said we got more work, better work done that Tuesday than we've had for a long time. So I think we're going to see a whole rewriting of how organizations work. I have no idea what it's going to look like, but I think this is going to go long enough for some new practices to embed, and for the brain to be looking for some new, different, better ways. I think we're probably going to finally ditch that old 9-to-5 industrial relations model. So from a spiritual point of view, I think it's going to be entirely different, because this time's giving people to stop and reflect. The earth is kind of having a chance to breathe, and humans are having a chance to breathe. And as traumatic as this is, and as great as the struggle is, there has to be something really beautiful. I often think of a butterfly coming out of a cocoon. You know, so much change happening in there and you can't see it. And then out comes this extraordinary butterfly and looks entirely different, and it's got wings. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I have a feeling on the other side of all of this, there's going to be something very, very interesting.
This time gives us an opportunity. I don't know, this sounds horrible to say. I don't hope this on anyone, but I'm coming back to Eric talking about that profound, beautiful saying of, you know, finding your purpose and what breaks your heart. And I think very unfortunately, many of us are dealing with some pieces of a broken heart right now. And I hope that what's born out of that really rich compost soil is some purpose for people. Again, coming back to that beautiful tree imagery. So a tree of purpose. And I hope that it also gives us the opportunity to focus on what's really important. And I think we're needing to. So, you know, if that's having financial security, just nuts and bolts of things, you know, I hope that this encourages people to save for times like this. I hope that, you know, if people found that time with family is so important as I have, I hope that that value really sticks with me past this. So I'm really curious to see how people make personal changes around what they've found is really important to them in this time period.
I just wanted to touch on Annie Ho typed in the chat, like if we haven't dealt with our past griefs because we haven't really sat in the feeling, and we're running so fast, we don't learn what we need to learn. And I think that that's, it's been my experience several times in my lives where I've had something difficult and I followed my old pattern and I had the problem come up again. And I joked about it when I injured my right leg, and then I ended up having the same injury in my left leg. I'm like, okay, I guess I didn't learn something that I needed to learn. So I do think that when we don't process our feelings, we get into resentment, re-feeling. The feelings get muddy and confusing. Whereas if we can really feel what we're feeling and, okay, so kind of sort this out, what else am I feeling and what's behind that? And things start becoming very, very clear. So my hope is that in this time, as everyone else has said, we're kind of forced into, you know, time out. We've been sent to our rooms. I'm a fan of Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. And a few years ago, I got to talk with Angeles Arian, a folklorist who wrote The Fourfold Way. And we just were talking about leadership. And I brought up how I used to think that the real challenge was the dragon battle, which in the hero's journey, you know, is this culmination. It's Luke fighting Darth Vader. But as I've gotten older, I've come to think that the real challenge of leadership, of self-leadership, is what Campbell called the return, which is where you go from the land of the heroic quest back into ordinary time. And Angeles shared that term with me, ordinary time, this notion that we're in an extraordinary time right now. And when this extraordinary time, I don't think it's going to be like end, right? I think it's going to be kind of gradually, we're going to start going back into more and more new normal, back into, you know, shelter in place is going to end in different places. We're going to start coming back into the cycle of life that's more like what we thought it was before. And I think the challenge is going to be, as we go back to ordinary time, can we hold on to that talisman? Can we hold the magic ring? Can we hold on to that insight that we found in this extraordinary time? I don't know what the secret to that is, but I do think a big piece of it is having the reflection, having the conversation, having the time to talk to each other like we are now and saying, okay, wait, what am I learning? So I think this kind of conversation for me is a huge gift for that kind of polishing of that gem, to kind of be able to see it more. And then I hope to be able to hold on to that insight in a few months.
Thank you, Josh. I gotta say, I feel very lucky that I've been the moderator of today's panel. It's been, for me, even just trying to listen to you and figure out what's the next question going to be. I've heard so many beautiful things that I'll bring with me for the next weeks. And I hope you that are listening on YouTube are going to be doing the same. Before we close and I give the word back to Jenny, I would like to remind you of a couple of things. If you would like to know more about a couple of tools that could actually be really useful during these times, please reach out because we have the SEQ profile from Spirit of EQ, and Eric can tell you more about that, and the Say Leading Through Change from UBalancer, and Alison will be happy to tell you more about that. One more thing that I would like to mention is if you enjoyed this live stream and all the Growing You classes that we've been offering, as a nonprofit, we would love your support in this challenging time. And so if you'd like to show your support with a donation on 6sec.org/donate, or by simply sharing our events with your friends, with your colleagues, we would appreciate that. Thank you so much to all the panelists, and I'll give the word back to Jenny.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. So good to see you all. And I just want to say we have tons of classes coming up. I also want to remind you that in this challenging time as a nonprofit, we need your support financially if you can donate, but equally important is your involvement. So joining, sharing, communicating. In the world right now, EQ is becoming very precious. So let's make sure we keep practicing and sharing. So please, if you like this webinar or like Growing You, please share it on your social media pages. And join us next week. We'll have another panel discussion, The Spark of Innovation, next Friday, the 10th at 8 a.m. San Francisco time. We'll put the chat in the link right now so you can register. And I hope to see you early in the morning tomorrow for my thoughts, feelings, and actions. Let's find some calm, and thank you so much, everyone.